All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are tackling one of the most, I think, challenging ideas in political history, aristocracy.
It's this fundamental claim, really, that the few who are best should be the ones to rule.
But that raises a huge question right from the start. Who exactly are the best?
And just as importantly, how do they justify their rule to everyone else? To the majority who are, by definition, not considered the best. That's the real tension this essay forces you to confront.
It's a political ideal that just never goes away, but it's always in conflict with other ideas like kingship or, of course, democracy.
It really is.
Now, before we dig into Plato's really radical take on this, I just want to mention something for you, our listener.
Yes.
What you're experiencing right now is a unique two-host AI conversation. It's powered by Google's Notebook LM.
We're using it specifically to get a deeper, more dynamic analysis of this essay. Lets us process these complex ideas and, get straight to the heart of the matter.
So with that, let's lay the classical foundation, aristocracy. What's the literal meaning?
It's simple, really. It just means rule of the best. The ideal, which comes right out of ancient Greek thought, is based completely on virtue and merit.
The idea being a government run by people who are morally and intellectually superior.
Exactly. But the sources we're looking at show this massive gap between that ideal and what happens in the real world.
Right. Political reality tends to get in the way.
It always does. The ideal is all about virtue, but in practice, what does history give us instead?
It's usually birthright, isn't it? Or just wealth.
Precisely. Inherited status or just having a lot of property.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a claim of superiority based on money, not on actual moral or intellectual quality.
This is where we need to understand the way the ancient Greeks thought about politics. They had a whole system for classifying governments, their polity.
They did, yes. It's very structured. They started with the number of rulers. So monarchy is ruled by one.
Democracy is ruled by the many.
And aristocracy is ruled by the few. But, and this is the key point for Plato and Aristotle, that definition only holds up if those few are actually ruling based on real virtue.
Okay, let's unpack that with maybe the biggest, most ambitious political vision ever. Plato's ideal of aristocracy in the Republic. We're talking about the philosopher guardians.
Right. Plato's system is what you'd call an absolute meritocracy. It's designed from the ground up to eliminate any chance of corruption.
So these philosopher guardians aren't born into it. They're selected.
They're selected through years, decades even, of rigorous training and testing. They often wouldn't be ready to rule until they were in their 50s.
And what was the goal of all that training?
To grasp what he called the form of the good, this abstract concept of ultimate reality and justice.
So their knowledge of the good is their only credential. That's what gives them the right to rule, not an election, not a battle.
That's it. Their authority comes entirely from their superior knowledge of justice. And here's the most radical part, which was Plato's safeguard against that corruption we mentioned.
The communal living.
Yes, the guardians had to live communally.
Tell us why that was so important for Plato. I mean, no private wealth, no private families. What's the political point of such a huge sacrifice?
The point is to completely remove self-interest from the equation. If a ruler has their own money, they'll start making laws to protect that money. If they have their own family, they'll favor their own children, and you get nepotism.
So by getting rid of private property and family ties, Plato believed their only motivation would be the good of the whole city.
Exactly. The system is designed to be incorruptible, where the rulers govern only for the sake of the people they rule.
It's a compelling idea, but you have to be skeptical. It sounds, well, utopian. What happens if these all-wise guardians make a huge mistake?
That's the question, isn't it?
How does the city check their power if the rulers truly believe they can't be wrong?
And that is the massive practical flaw. Plato offers no way to hold them accountable because, in his view, how can the less wise correct the truly wise?
It's a closed loop.
It is. And that problem is what led Aristotle to come up with a more, let's say, practical framework.
So if Plato gives us this incredible, maybe impossible ideal, Aristotle gives us the tools to diagnose when it goes wrong.
Perfect way to put it. Aristotle shifts the focus from who is ruling to why they are ruling. It's all about their intent.
And this brings us to his famous classification of 6 types of government, 3 good and 3 corrupt.
Correct. He distinguishes between the correct forms and their corrupt or deviant forms based on one thing. Do the rulers govern for the common good or just for themselves?
Let's quickly walk through them because the words he uses can mean something different to us today.
Okay, the 3 correct forms are monarchy, aristocracy, and politeia.
Monarchy is rule by one for the common good. Aristocracy, as we've said, is rule by the virtuous few for the common good. What's politeia?
Politeia is rule by the many for the common good. You can think of it as a kind of constitutional government, often led by the middle class.
And then each of those has a dark side, a corrupt version.
Exactly. Tyranny is the corrupt version of monarchy, where the one rules for himself. Oligarchy is the corrupt version of aristocracy.
And democracy, but a very specific negative version of it for Aristotle.
Yes, for him, democracy was the corrupt form of rule by the many. It meant the poor ruling purely in their own self-interest, often at the expense of the rich.
So the key distinction when we're talking about the rule of the few is that an oligarchy is the rich ruling for their own benefit.
While a true aristocracy is the virtuous ruling for the benefit of everyone, that test common good versus self-interest becomes the main way to judge any ruling class.
It's amazing how this problem has stuck around. How do you get the wisdom of an aristocracy without it just becoming a self-serving oligarchy?
It's a central question of politics. And speaking of these deeper philosophical questions, if you find this kind of rational exploration inspiring, remember you can find more in-depth content just like this on Mindful Moments.
That's our YouTube channel.
It is. We offer AI essay analysis, summaries, and critiques, all designed to inspire reflection and rational thought.
So moving on from the ancient world, this tension didn't just vanish. Later thinkers kept wrestling with it.
They did, and they tried to engineer solutions. A very popular idea was the mixed constitution.
What does that mean in practice? Blending aristocratic parts with more popular democratic ones.
Exactly. They weren't just theories. They were trying to build systems with structural safeguards for wisdom. So you'd see thinkers defending institutions like senates.
Or systems of indirect elections.
Right. The idea was to create a wiser or slower body, that's the aristocratic element, that could act as a check on the immediate impulses of the masses.
You can kind of see that in the original design of something like the U.S. Senate, can't you?
Absolutely. It was intended to be a more deliberative body to check the popular will coming from the House of Representatives. It's a modern attempt to blend the few with the many.
But while some were trying to incorporate it, others were launching a full-on attack.
They were, arguing that this whole idea of aristocracy was just a fancy mask for plain old class domination.
That the best just happened to be the people who were already rich and powerful.
And that critique leads us right into the tension that modern democracy still faces. There's this lingering aristocratic worry.
A fear that maybe the majority, without special instruction, might be short-sighted or easily swayed.
Yes, or just make bad decisions on really complex issues. You see it all the time in debates about climate science or economic policy.
Where the technical knowledge required seems way beyond what you can expect the average citizen to have.
But, and the sources are very clear on this, even with that worry, modern thought completely rejects the idea of unconditional aristocratic authority.
So even if you are the expert, you still have to be accountable to the public.
Your authority has to come from the people. We've totally rejected Plato's model of unaccountable philosopher kings.
Which brings us to the ethical test. If aristocracy is only okay when it's based on merit, how do we judge that merit? The sources use what they call Adlerian standards.
It's a really powerful way to measure legitimacy. Any aristocratic system has to be tested against, well, the golden rule and the basic goals of a just constitution.
So it's only defensible if the standards for being the best are public and they're applied impartially to everyone.
Absolutely. You can't have a special privilege for birth or wealth.
What does applying the golden rule mean in this context specifically?
It means the rulers have to be willing to live under the same rules they create. Would they accept these standards if they were an ordinary citizen? If the answer is no, then it fails the impartiality test.
So a true aristocracy has to be open, at least in principle, to anyone who can achieve that level of virtue or merit.
If it's not an aristocracy. It's an oligarchy that's just using prettier language.
So the final evaluation really comes down to this. Does adding an aristocratic element to a government actually promote justice and liberty for all citizens?
Or does it just lock in unearned power and violate the idea that all citizens have equal dignity?
That's the whole journey, right? We start with this pure philosophical ideal of rule by the wise.
And we end with the hard political reality that power and privilege can corrupt almost anything. The concept forces us to keep asking what best really means in government.
What's so interesting is that this tension is still alive and well, even in our own democratic systems. We say we reject aristocratic authority.
But we are completely reliant on expertise. And that's the modern aristocratic element.
How so?
Well, think about it. We appoint judges for life. We have specialized regulatory agencies like the FDA or central banks like the Federal Reserve, run by unelected experts.
These are all small groups of highly educated, largely unaccountable people making huge policy decisions.
They are modern attempts to integrate the rule by expertise into a democratic system.
And that's the final thought for you to take away. Where do we draw the line today? Where does that balance point lie between needing expertise, our modern rule of the best, and the non-negotiable demand for public accountability?
It's a question that really defines the modern state.
For more analysis of this essay and other related texts, click the link on your screen for the in-depth essay summary. And don't forget to subscribe, share, purchase via the link, and think rationally.
And see the many genre-based essay podcasts at Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.